Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to be future me. And I realized I had gone on to not make 2 points um, that was to have been somewhere within this video. So, with these two things, a little concerned. We come to find out in current news, Hasbro is to have signed off some of its toys rights to Playmate. Supposedly, from what I have to have heard, it's to have been the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers rights to sell off to Playmate. And I'm like, okay, like, does that mean that Hasbro is going to just turn around and become a fire sale and everything must go? And it's not only the toys rights, but then it's going to be the comic book rights and the show rights and the movie rights, because everything just must go. Hasbro may just be tired with a show that doesn't reach a wide enough audience, or is to have a YouTube channel that is to be something that doesn't make enough money. Who knows? But either way, uh, really, that is to make me more and more concerned about the future of Power Rangers, with there possibly just being a selling of Power Rangers rights. Maybe that selling will go on and really be nothing in the grand scheme of things. We'll maybe still get Lightning collection action figures of Mighty Morphin or anything, and Playmate will just be doing its thing also. I don't know. The next thing up for either concern or just a kind of sad moment is we come to find out that Boom Studios is to wrap up its Mighty Morphin story for Power Rangers. And really, for me, I'm not surprised, because it seems that none of the more recent Power Rangers magazine comic book stories are really selling that well. They really aren't. Because really, Shattered Grid was a huge seller, I think, because really that was a huge crisis event that it seemed everybody loved. And everybody went on to at least cover what was going on in Shattered Grid. A ton of people, a ton of YouTubers covered that story. And even covered stuff that was to be like pre Shattered Grid also, because the story was that good. Then we now have, I think, the comic book kind of doing an evil villain, an evil Power Rangers story, and I really think that that is just rinse and repeat. And what stories are they left to really tell now at this point for Power Rangers? But Boom Studios is going on and sitting on uh, Power Rangers to maybe still be involved in a future story that they can still tell, maybe when we have newer Power Rangers content. And the comic books are going to tie with that. That's a possibility. We have had also the Power Rangers comic books have a hell of a run. They had gone on to do um, like Justice League and Power Rangers, Godzilla and Power Rangers, and I think Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, but I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I could say all these kinds of stuff, and maybe they aren't legitimate comic books, but I don't know. Um, really, with that saying, um, there had been a lot of years where Power Rangers had been a comic book, regardless of how short lived they were. Still, um, there always is going to be a Power Rangers comic book, regardless. So, um, really, it's just going to come down to what new, fresh stories that they can tell, and hopefully not just still have it be Mighty Morphin and that's it. But I I think I would not, if they come up with newer Power Rangers stories for the comic books. I really would not be interested until they have a crisis event, until they have a big event for Power Rangers in the comic books, to then be like, okay, now I'm going to jump into this book. I'm going to see what happens in the story. Because really, for the comic books, again, like, to gather all these issues just to uh, see that, okay, nothing's going on here, nothing's going on here. Like, oh, okay, I can finally get behind one issue out of four. Hence why I would go on and do a lot of comic book research and find out like what's the big event for certain characters and certain series and certain whatever, and collect those rather than collect the books as a whole. It's just easier that way. But anyways, with that said, I'm gonna go on and uh, roll out to me talking about Power Rangers pitches, as well as also just kind of talking about Power Rangers in general. Maybe talking about a lot of behind the scenes stuff, where Walter Jones had broken the nose of some putty. Maybe not. We'll see. Because that's one of the stories that Walter had. But yeah, um, if you've never gone on and seen any of the Power Rangers behind the scenes featurette stuff, you should really check that out. Those are some fun stories. But then also, I watched more and more of the Power Rangers interviews through a number of people that had gone on and done um, those interviews, and they like you eventually got to hear little things about the show or the stories or whatever. Like 8 auditions in 1 month to consistently come back and hope that you're going to get this job of being a Power Ranger. It's crazy. Then also 3 episodes in 1 week. Sounds pretty crazy to me. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here so you can enjoy this video. Um, but anyways, goodbye everybody. Enjoy. Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about Power Rangers. To talk about some current news that has been going out, and also to pitch some things and to get my thoughts, opinions, concerns about Power Rangers product whatsoever. And really, if anything, just kind of just talk, you know? So, with that said, uh, for us to come up with any kind of opinions about Power Rangers or ideas or pitches or whatever, really, Power Rangers is a well oiled machine that is on cruise control, but you're still holding onto the steering wheel thinking that, like, well, I'm doing something right. Like, I've watched enough of this show, like, I can come up with a clear consensus myself about it, and give my criticisms or yays or nays or whatever. And hopefully, the Power Rangers people that work with this are to hear said concerns, but then also really have it be that you're like a person that is to go in and order a Pepsi at a restaurant. And the waiter of that restaurant is to be the writer, the producer, the creator of Power Rangers, And it's going to be like, well, is Coke okay? Because, yeah, it has to be, because what else do you have? Like, I guess Coke just has to be fine. But with that said, I honestly want to stress how much I would love to be involved in anything Power Rangers related. Fan film, uh, role playing game, especially if it's something easy to actually uh, me, myself, and I obtain to be able to play and whatever. Uh, yeah, I would enjoy that. I would love that. So on and so forth. Uh, if there is to be any kind of other uh, just collab or whatever that involves Power Rangers, sign me up. I'd be happy to do that. If it seems like I'm an intelligent enough person that seems to know enough about Power Rangers, I could probably talk about it. Who knows? Um, but anyways, Power Rangers. We have to honestly realize that too often, um, we've all just kind of been the people that would say, like, well, I only watch Mighty Morphin and that's all I watch. And to consistently, like, try to resell Mighty Morphin eventually is a losing battle. Just like, well, hey, just give us more of that Mighty Morphin. Just bring it back completely as a show. It's like, well, they're technically already kind of doing that in the Once and Always special, so why do they need to do that even more so? What will they benefit from legitimately bringing it back as a show? And also, they probably have to replace half of the cast for one reason or another, because they're eventually going to have to. But anyways, uh, really one thing that I saw that ultimately ruined two different Power Ranger seasons for me was I was to go on and watch Mystic Force, which I thought was like a really fun show. I really enjoyed. But then all of a sudden I saw the villain in Mystic Force, Korag. Korag, I come to find out, is a knight-like character, and is to be purple, and is to have a shield and sword, and he's kind of this honorable villain. And at some point, the villain ends up turning good and ends up working with the Power Rangers, I believe, from the story, because I haven't seen all of Mystic Force. Then I'm like, why does this character seem so familiar to me? And then I look at Void Knight and I'm like, oh my god, it's the same exact freaking thing. The same exact character. Wow. So, when really looking more and more at Mystic Force, I just see a huge comparison to Dino Fury. So, any of the real cosmetically things that I ever said positive about Dino Fury, I can take that all back right here and now. To just be like, wow, like, Dino Fury had completely copied and pasted from Mystic Force in one way or another, but then also had a Dino theme going on. So the only thing that I can like about Dino Fury now is the fact that it had a Dino theme, and that's it. Which, really, even that, I don't really care for. So it kind of ruins both Mystic Force for me, which is actually better than Dino Fury was. Uh, from whatever episodes I've been watching of Mystic Force. Then, like, it ruins also Dino Fury because it's just less creativity. Even more so than I originally thought. So, man, that kind of really upset me. It really did. Uh, but I just have to deal with it because, like, Power Rangers tends to recycle too much of everything. But then again, like, I can't tell the difference between one episode and the other. Like, there could be just one idea that I thought was like, wow, like, this one idea is really cool. But then I realized that it's been done 20 times in the past, and I just wouldn't know because I haven't seen enough of these shows to realize it's been done 20 times in the past. Because I don't have that good enough skill of a memory to know all of that. But so, really, we've come to find out that also, there's ever a time where there is to be a ranger that comes back from the past, it's really just because of low ratings. It's really the truth. And so consistently, when you're to see like Billy going into Cosmic Fury, that's because Dino Fury didn't do that well. They say it's, oh no, it's an anniversary thing. It's low ratings, right? Because if the story was all written that well, you wouldn't have needed Lord Zed to come back to carry the show. It's low viewership. It's the really disinterest of the newer latest product because really you're not doing enough to appeal to people. You really aren't. Uh, but eventually, it's also convenient that most of these Power Rangers things of content are also on Netflix. So you can watch that at any time. Or you can watch it on YouTube, which even has even more Power Rangers content. But so really I'm going to go on and talk about the writers of Power Rangers because I had seen this whole featurette about the writers of Power Rangers, and I start to see that there's certain writers that had been on the show for a very long time. And I can understand that via every single season now, why every single season always looked or seemed the same. Especially when you get on to a point where every single one of the Rangers are very bland and very vanilla. It's because of the same writers being used a number of seasons. Or one writer would go on and tell you, it's like, well, yeah, like all we did is want to really focus on putting out really good villain stories. I'm like, that's the wrong way to approach this show. When you slap the word Power Rangers on a title screen, that's what's selling the product, not, hey, let's make good villains. That's not going to sell this show. It's not. But so, like, make a balanced story. A balanced story. But so, hearing these writers and knowing how long that they've been on the show for, or to also hear that somebody was to be an outside person coming in to do some kind of project with Power Rangers, and they ended up turning around and becoming a writer. I'm like, that person just wanted a writing credit for the show. Like, they didn't care about even probably putting out a passable episode, but luckily they did. And so all of a sudden they just became a writer on the show, or left and just wrote something elsewhere, which really was a passable episode. But yeah, kind of that got me more and more concerned about like the quality of the shows over time, especially when they were going on and eventually uh, having writers that have been on there forever and they're just kind of recycling the same things over and over again, and you should really be able to easily see it because really maybe the writers were just writing the show into the ground. Who knows? There could be any number of factors to uh to a poor season of Power Rangers beyond uh like just the writing. It could just be the actors that have to deliver this, or really the writers not being able to get to know the actors all that well and just be like, well, like we have nothing to write for them, so we're just going to write these stories. But anyways, uh we also come to find out that there is to never be a kick in the head because that's too violent. So I guess they had to, at some points, figure out a way to tone down the show, like to always have any blasters being set to stun, and to try as much as possible to make the show seem less violent. Funny, um, because they're trying to appeal to a certain audience, let's just say. But yeah, so pitches and stuff that I can talk about on the show that is much more so than just like looking at all the behind the scenes stuff and kind of just realizing that, like, man, I could really the more and more that I find out about Power Rangers, the more and more I'm like, I understand. I understand now. I understand why the show is progressively getting worse over time instead of better. And still wanting to come back to the show regardless, because I am just be a diehard fan, I guess. And plus, also, I'm waiting to eventually see if the newer product is going to deliver something different finally, and finally give me a really good story, like at least Cosmic Fury tried to do. And eventually I might just go through and go through that story and just realize, oh, maybe I was wrong. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So I have two seasons of which that I had talked about prior for Power Rangers pitch, but I've kind of, in the time since then, started to really add a bunch of stuff to those tales, to those stories, that maybe can go on and be its own separate pitch for another season of Power Rangers. We'll see. So there have been two seasons that I came up with, which is Power Rangers Tarot, which is kind of a more supernatural season, and Power Rangers Primal, which is to have been a prequel season to Mighty Morphin. The easiest way to explain it is to really just have it feel like a Chris Pine Star Trek kind of approach to Power Rangers without the younger Kirk or Spock or Scotty or whoever from those movies like be a part of a prequel Mighty Morphin series. I'm not talking about a younger Jason, a younger Tommy, and a younger Kimberly, because they tried that in that movie and it didn't work out. Because really, they didn't give us a Tommy or Green Ranger whatsoever in that movie, and that's the thing that hurt it the most. But so, with the exclusion of having a Rita Green Ranger for 3 seconds, and no one cared. But so how I'm gonna work this Power Rangers Primal story and make it seem a little bit different than what it was. Uh, we do have a future character coming back to the past to work on the command center prior to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers to help us understand that future tech comes back to give the Rangers all their gadgets and their morphers and their whatever to justify like how this time period can have this technology. So to the point where, yeah, you can have all the inventors that you want come up with all of this stuff in a number of other Power Rangers seasons, but it still doesn't make sense. It still doesn't. And in all honesty, you could have a number of future people go back to the past to just kind of fund these certain characters to still have it be like uh, one way or the other. Future people had come back to the past to uh, make sure that this command center or whatever was all going to work out, was all going to pan out, was all going to eventually lead to the Power Rangers possibly being victorious, one way or the other. But so we have this future Power Ranger coming back to the past, and maybe he's a part of the Time Force division, maybe he's not. And so I honestly wanted to play around with this Time Force Power Ranger being actually a Time Force Power Ranger. And I have a whole mask and idea of who this character is going to be. And I honestly thought it would be fun to just have him be a Surian, which is to be the dog alien character. So that way we have more Surians on the show beyond, I think, Dane or Kruger. Uh, there's probably maybe more than that, but to each their own. So that character ends up coming back to work on this command center to eventually have this future villain come back to try and stop the command center from ever getting made for obvious reasons. And we really go on and have me also want to completely change the main villain for this show, because I say show, but then I'm also just really thinking it's probably going to end up just being a comic book, because that's where I really think that's going to head. I don't think I have good enough quality story ideas to make a legit Power Ranger show, even though it just should be that, because really look at all the other Power Ranger show ideas. Really look at them. So, we have a future villain that could be a number of ideas. Really, we could have it be one, the story that I was originally running with, which was the Phantom Ranger, that we come to find out is Zordon's son. And then Zordon's son can go on and become the kind of Lord Zedish like villain of this story. And so we have a hero, we have the villain, and then the hero is going to be desperate to need a team of Power Rangers from this time, but then also the unlikely of people to team up with to go up against this threat. And in all honesty, if I was to go on and play Power Rangers in a role play game, I would honestly want to be 3 different characters rolled into one. So I want to be basically the Power Rangers Zeo Gold Ranger. I want to be Trey. I want to be 3 characters so I can have as much fun as I can and get the most out of the game, and still probably be very baffled and confused and have to put in too much work into this whole ordeal. But hey, it would be a lot of fun. But so we would have this Surian, and the Surian is to be, again, dog alien, and he ends up going on to find a other character that I ended up calling in the original rough draft of Power Rangers Primal to be Rido, which I'm still going with that name. I'm still going with Rido. Rido is to. I'm also going to go and just talk about the supernatural story that I've kind of been more working on in this video, because why not? Because really, what other kind of Power Rangers ideas can you really pitch here that is to really not just be like the whole thing is carried on a certain theme that is to be seemingly brand new to the show, but also I'm doing a Power Rangers prequel story, but I also know the comic book had done a Power Rangers prequel story. Not probably the exact same as this, but still, I'm putting that out there. And plus, also, the prequel thing was just a female Red Ranger. That's cool. But like the rest of the story, I think was heavily generic. Didn't really matter to me whatsoever what played out in that. And obviously, it didn't seem to matter for whoever was to do the video on that either, because it is what it is. So we have the character Rido, and this is to be the firstborn son of Master Vile. So brother, sister, Rido, and Rita. So Rido, I had come to imagine, had slaughtered the whole Goldar family. His father, Chrome Dar, maybe his mother is Ruby Dar, maybe his brother is to have some other kind of name. I don't know. Maroon Dar. I don't know. Whatever ends up being like a metal or some kind of something that we can kind of make a name of, or a gem or a stone or something. Boldar, Boldardar, Boldardar, Boldardar. Um, but yeah, so eventually Rido goes and slaughters the whole Dar family, as I like to call them. And then he turns around and comes back and he makes Master Vile happy. But then again, Master Vile turns around and tells like his firstborn son, it's like, well, yeah, but I want you to go on and I want you to kill one more person. And I guess really in Power Rangers you can't say kill. I want you to take out one more person. And that person ends up being Rita. And of course Rido says, no, not doing it. And since he had gone on to defy Master Vile, he ends up getting banished. Maybe in Earth time, this is right around the Ice Age, where Rido ends up getting frozen, and I'm not quite sure if the caveman from Dino Charge gets the same treatment, because I've now watched that. But if also still works, it still could work. And really, it doesn't matter, because if this is a better character than that, then clearly it doesn't matter. It just needs to be a better character than whatever previously happened there. But so we have either one of two things. We could have the Surian, who is to really just have Rido be one of his personalities, but we don't know who is to be the real Trey, so to speak. Out of the three characters, the real Trey, could he stand up? Who knows? But then we can also have a third personality that could be either a human character or something that is still, again, alien, or maybe it's half and half. And this character has a really interesting backstory that maybe has some tie with any number of Power Rangers from any of the history that has gone on to exist. Because if Raido can live for 10,000 years and never age, we can also possibly have a Surian that I don't know how long that maybe he lives for. Don't know. Uh, but then also we could have a human that's half alien and maybe he lives longer. I don't know. But so really, I was also kind of fascinated with there being a Power Ranger that has multiple personalities. Like X-Men's Legion. The Legion character eventually has like who knows how many personalities, and each one of those personalities has a superpower. And man, that would be fun to work as a character for Power Rangers. Yeah, you can't do that on the show because that would cost way too much money. And also, you would probably have to narrow it down to a certain number of personalities that you would see more consistently on the show, and then you would have these random ones that kind of popped up every once in a while. And then also, you would start to have you would start to have certain characters that do really well that aren't used as much on the show. So that kind of sucks to suck, right? But anyways, um, that would be cool to have like one character that could be like a Swiss Army knife for the Power Rangers. Like, hey, you need a healer doctor character. Boom, there's a personality. Hey, you need a uh just fighter personality. Boom, here's this one, and so on and so forth. Uh, for whatever the show is going to need, you would have a personality that could fit that bill. Really. Um, that would also be a challenge to kind of write all these new characters and give them all these stories and that, but it would be fun too. But anyways, uh, that would probably end up being just a comical character that they would probably never fully fledgedly use, but it would be cool for a story. But so, ooh, excuse me. So I went on it and I kind of talked about that. So villains, the villain idea. The Power Rangers Tarot, uh, the kind of the card Power Rangers series that I thought of. Like, I don't know if I said this on that video, so I'm going to say it here. The villain that I've kind of come up with or I've been playing around with for that show is called Hexus. Hexus. If you had gone on to ever Google this thing called a hex bag, really, I just wanted to go on and make an entire villain look like that. And that probably does go on and it looks very similar to the Nightmare Before Christmas villain, but really it's going to be way thinner of looking of a character, and uh, the eyes and the mouth are probably going to be a lot more red than they are black uh, from that quasi character. So it's an idea that I'm throwing out there. Villains. Villains for the Power Rangers Primal show. So a lot of these are going to be possible villains that had come from prior Power Rangers seasons, regardless of like, well, hey, like Zordon wiped that all out. I don't care at this point. Really, we could just write in the really, we can just come with this time of like everything that Zordon tried to kill, yeah, it's not going to last. At some point, all of the characters that were evil are going to come back to being evil because Zordon's son exists in this time period, and you can also just state that like the Zordon wave or whatever is creating people evil again. There could be a number of ways to just kind of work around the fact that, like, hey, there's still a Zordon out there that exists in this timeline. Because it's pre-Zordon. You could work around this. So, or you can just kind of, you can work around, like, time travel and whatever have you. So, give me a break. I'm trying to justify the villain still being used. So, villains that are to be in future shows past Mighty Morphin, but we're doing a time loop or time travel thing anyways. Prince Gasket and Prince Sprocket, because if the villain is a Phantom Ranger who's the son of Zordon, I'm going to use all the sons and daughters from every single Power Ranger season that has ever existed and use them in this story here to give them more important roles. I want to go on and I want to bring Trent back. Trent, who I believe was the white Dino Thunder Ranger, and I want to make him Meso Gaiden or Meso Gog Jr. and have him like have the same afflictions that his father had and make him into a half dinosaur, half evil white Power Ranger again, and have his problem being story related. So I think it's Trent. I think his name was Trent from the Dino Thunder show, who was the White Ranger. I want to make him a villain. Bring him back. Do it that way. JJ could be introduced into this show as a villain because maybe something happened with Tommy to all of a sudden turn both Kat and JJ or Catherine into villains, because I think the actual Cat actress wanted to be a villain again anyways, so what a perfect way to write this character back in as a villain to stop Mighty Morphin from ever happening, so Tommy never becomes the Green Ranger or the White Ranger or eventually dies. That could be an interesting story to tell. JJ could ultimately be the Phantom Ranger villain. He could be the Phantom Ranger. But yeah, uh, that would be a fun story to tell. But then also, there's so many sons and daughters that have ever been a Power Rangers villain that would be cool to just bring them back. Like Emperor Grum from Dino Thunder, like, or no, wait, SBD. He had a daughter that turns young and old, so bring him back, or bring the daughter back, and have her be much older now, and she's going to be the newer kind of henchman villain of this story. Ransik's daughter, so on and so forth. There's so many characters that were the daughters and sons of somebody, to bring them back to just kind of have one last hurrah of the story. But also, you could have Master Vile becoming like the first ever Power Rangers villain, and he has his stuff that he can work against the Power Rangers with. And also, I'm still playing with that kind of Goldar family story. Maybe the Goldar family is to go on and be the first ever to fight against the Power Rangers. That would be kind of fun. That would be kind of interesting. And then Raido kills them all. You could have that be a one shot with Raido killing Goldar's family. It would be fun. And really going dark and deep with it, because we're really just saying, like, hey man, like, we're trying to appeal to a different audience with this one comic book. Because we know the older fans are gonna really like this story, so here's where we're going with this. And make it dark and gritty. For one time in Power Rangers history, make a dark and gritty story. But meh, Power Rangers won't go that route, right? So we could also, like, all of that is all a lot to really play with, but I would also want to just come up with original monsters and original minions. Maybe like I already did in the other first draft, where I talked about possibly going on and doing Walkman as the very first minions. Walkman, of course, if you guys ever remember those like Walkmans, if you saw Guardians of the Galaxy, you would see a Walkman. That's what I wanted to make a villain out of, or a minion out of. And eventually you would punch the minion in the chest, and the cassette would come flying out, and then the putty or the whatever, the minion would die that way. That's what I wanted to go on and do for a minion, and I thought that was kind of a cool idea. Uh, like, I really wanted this to be a prequel to Mighty Morphin, so I wanted to make this kind of like an 80s themed show with, of course, the future technology, but still an 80s themed show, because I think also that the more comic books like don't tie into the time, but are just kind of putting together like a Power Ranger story. So with that said, yeah, like, I don't want to just rehash a bunch of monsters from the Power Ranger show, but like, I always did really enjoy certain ones, like Slate from Power Rangers SPD, or the Eye Guy was always cool. There's a number of monsters that was kind of used in every Power Ranger season, and eventually I did really like them. But I'd have to just kind of really go in and really pick and choose which was my favorite monster by kind of looking through uh, the Monster Legacy monster list per season. Just like, oh, I liked that one. Oh, I hated this one, and so on and so forth. Or, oh, I like this monster visually, but like the story was garbage. That could be a fun video to do, but not really sure if anybody's really all that interested. And plus, I'm kind of worried that any number of those images might be some kind of goofy copyright thing, and I'm kind of concerned. But anyways, uh, really, I think the real image of which that I took here to make Tommy like the biggest character out of all this whole image was really because it's true. Tommy Oliver was a character that really carried Power Rangers for the longest time, and I think at some point that they're going to have to figure out a way to reinvent a Tommy Oliver character, whether it's to just go on and come up with a brand new actor and just say, okay, hey, this is going to be uh, Tommy Oliver, when they pretty much go on and have to do a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers reboot show. But also, it would be kind of nice to have like a character that is to just be uh, the Tommy Oliver replacement. If you have a good quality character that is to be a Sixth Ranger quality and is to be written well, is to actually for once be written well. Because man, of all the Rangers, they haven't really been like. Eventually, you'll come on to a certain Power Ranger show, and you'll find out a really like unique character that ends up becoming a Ranger. But yeah, the further and further you go along in the seasons, the more that comes fewer and far between. So, like looking at Dino Fury, like even the Sixth Ranger sucked. The Sixth Ranger in Power Ranger Samurai sucked, even though really all the other Rangers were kind of good anyways. So it just kind of balanced that out. Um, the Megaforce Sixth Ranger probably sucked visually and otherwise. Just it sucked. Um, well, I think it did have that one thing about it, the weird looking shield thing. But even that, like, I don't know if I could really justify that had any good cosmetics to it. But that's just me. So, uh, now that I've gone on and talked about my Power Rangers show pitch, which really it's still the same idea I had years ago, because none of that stuff has really hugely changed, and the show still works, and the Power Rangers Tarot still works. Man, this show keeps cranking out things, but not good enough ideas that match the things that I've ever come up with. Why is that? Rinse and repeat. But so I then go on and I've had this supernatural character story that I've been carrying along far too long, and now I'm gonna go on and say what all it's about. Yes, it's not a Power Ranger story, but maybe it can somehow fit. To be retconned as a Power Ranger story, give me a way to possibly figure it out how it can fit in. So, firstly, instead of I think originally the story was to be kind of a Ghost Rider esh like character, but I think I've kind of changed it over time. So we come to find this very young kid who is talking to a woman in a mirror, not really having a real conclusion in this kid's brain of like, hey, I probably should not be talking to this woman in this mirror. This makes no sense. Uh, what is it that she can possibly like give me that I might not regret later? So we come to find that the more and more that this kid talks to the woman in the mirror, that eventually she offers this kid something, which is to be three wishes. This sounds very Disney-esque, but roll with me anyways. So the kid ends up making these wishes of being this person involved in movies. Maybe he's a. I want to feel like he's going to be a monster man in a suit for a number of these films. And then the second wish is for him to eventually to own a movie theater. Excuse me. He's eventually to go on and own a movie theater. And then the third wish is that he's going to wish that he's going to be the best friends with the devil. Doesn't sound like an actual young audience friendly wish, but I don't care. So this main character of this story that I think I'm just gonna call either Valhallo or Valhallows or Hallows. Valhallows. Yeah. Um Radek Hardcastle. That is the goofiest name that I come up with, but Radek Hardcastle. Um, but that is a funny name too. And then there's also uh, another name that comes from Sanheim. And so I always kind of wanted to have a character eventually to be called San. So for story purposes, I'm calling the main character San. San. So San makes these wishes, and we come to find out that they all backfire, with that meaning that the wishes come with a cost. The wishes come with a debt. So we come to find that our character is to need to create these Herculean like tasks. If you ever are to go on and to have known about like the 12 labors of Hercules, then like you'll know where I'm going with this. So we come to find that San ends up having to be forced to be a reaper that collects souls. And how that happens is San one day is to be able to talk to his shadow. His shadow, we end up finding, is none other than his own soul. And so San ends up talking to his soul, that of course is to uh, dress and look the exact opposite of him, and is to again probably come off as a more Ghost Rider-ish like character, but it's this person's shadow. Really, we could have it to be that Sin is to wear all white, and the shadow is to wear all black. Just clashing opposite colors for whatever our character is to be wearing that day. Maybe if Sin wears dark green, then the shadow wears light green, and so on and so forth. Kind of roll with me on this one. I'm coming up with these ideas. It's rolling off the top of my head. So we have San, who is to talk to his shadow, and his shadow is to be all knowledgeable of the afterlife or underworld or whatever we want to say that the uh, purgatory or heaven or hell really is to be called in this world. And so San eventually ends up talking to his own shadow, and maybe the character ends up, the story ends up being called My Shadow, or ends up being calling Shadow Rider, because maybe it's actually attached to Marvel. I don't know. Shadow Rider would actually be kind of a funny title to run with, but who knows? So, and eventually maybe it'll get plural because of how this story is going to turn out. So, Shadow Riders. Anyways, so we have San, who turns into this shadow character and is to collect souls, and this debt still never gets paid. Or we come to find that Shadow is to still, even after collecting souls, still accumulates too much debt for doing one thing or another. Maybe going on and uh, stepping in and doing the right thing and having a soul go into heaven instead of hell, and so on and so forth. So, uh, taking way too long to talk about this whole tale that has nothing to do with Power Rangers, maybe. So we come to find that San is to be working on movies and films, and his movie theater seems to be going well enough. And he is to always have like costume props of everything that he's ever gone on and done in this movie theater. So, and we're going to play around with this movie theater a lot, but it's not going to be the setting of which the final crisis is going to fully go into. Or the final crisis, the crisis event, let's just say. So I would say final crisis because that's where the story for right now is going to end. But bear with me. So we have San that goes on to realize that like there's no more stories that is really being turned out for him to continue to work on. So San is realizing that it's like, well, there's only one more story left to tell, and that is to possibly be my own story. And also, San and the Shadow has had so many conversations about the afterlife or the underworld or whatever it ends up being called, that San has been able to just kind of run with all these stories and make so much of them. So we get to a point where the people who run the afterlife or underworld do not like that a shadow is going on and telling the truth about the afterlife. And so, since further and further they distaste for the truth being told, we then have like this all it's all collectively happening within the very first time that San is going to market this at a convention, at a Comic-Con. This either comic book or movie or show or whatever it ends up being. So San brings this content to this convention, and we all of a sudden start to have these demon doors that are starting to open, and all of these monsters come spilling out. San has no idea what's really going on because maybe he was told in very vague terms that, like, hey man, if you don't stop wanting to sell this story, apocalypse will happen. It's like, well, what exactly do you mean by that? And then the very next day, we have these demon doors opening and all of these monsters spilling out of it. So we now have a crisis event that takes place at a convention / Comic-Con. And in all honesty, to just kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, I had gotten this idea from two things. Dead Rising 2, but then also Fanboys versus Zombies. But it's not the exact same idea, so it's not like I'm going and having somebody become a zombie from a horrible hot dog. That's not what I'm doing here. So we come to find that San is to meet up with this group of people and need to help them and save them, and eventually need to further go in to other locations to help out people for one reason or another. And we'll find out that that is possibly going to be a mistake because writing for a story. So, San, we come to find, is to also have me want to adjust the story. Because really, we can come to find that this group is also going to be just like San, and they will also have a shadow counterpart to them to go on and be able to have this like group of shadow riders, hence why I was coming up with that idea. um I'm kind of back and forthing, thinking of maybe possibly that San had at one point been forced into the afterlife, and he is now looking at all these people and saying like, well, hey, you're all dead, and you're going to end up just like I did, and so I have to tell you that you're all dead right now so you can all help me out. So, kind of a fun story, I guess, maybe, who knows. So, San goes on to fight against these monsters, zombies, werewolves, vampires. Eventually, you'll find out that Sam has a way to tell, like, how all of these monsters are who they are. Like vampires, eventually, you can tell by how much sunscreen that they have on them, or really how pale they are. Then also, a werewolf isn't always a werewolf, but you can tell if a guy is to be a werewolf because he eats too much. He eats more than the average person. So, also with a body type, you could probably also tell whether a person is going to be a werewolf, also. So, uh, and then a zombie, like, eventually, if you've ever seen a zombie movie, not every single time does a person who is be bitten by a zombie immediately come one. There maybe is a slower process to that where it's like, well, hey, like, if I just nibble on um this already dead carcass, maybe I won't quickly slip away into becoming this zombie rage monster and whatever. And maybe that's how we play the story out. Maybe there is to be a lot more than that. Maybe it just changes quickly. I don't know. Well, it kind of depends on the character. It kind of depends on the way in which that I want to approach a zombie story, of a person becoming a zombie. Who knows? Zombies can be drastically different, but um, eventually, further and further, we come to find that the names of which and the stuff that uh that the shadow had told San, the longer and longer we're in this monster world slash crisis event. I think Monster World sounds cooler because I honestly was to think that there could just be a monster world that exists. And really, with any crisis event, like, I feel that that could just be called Monster World. Um, but anyways, we come to find that everything that San was to have found out from Shadow all really and truly does exist, and these characters are going to come forward to combat against Shadow, and uh, we'll kind of see where that story comes out. There was also a thought of me that uh, what if San becomes a werewolf or a zombie or a vampire? How is that going to work out? I was like, could you go on and do a whole story where eventually towards the end you kill the main character? That could be a cool way to end the story, but San, eventually you could just kill him off and figure out a way to write him back into another story and just say like, well, yeah, he was dead, but the afterlife would not go on and accept him, so they just made him alive again and took away vampire, werewolf, zombie curse and just made him human again and said, like, well, like, you're a foot soldier and we still need you to be out there and doing what you're doing. So, but yeah, like, there's also going to be a lead up of sand going on and uh and selling the afterlife for souls, but then also he's also going to be like fighting monsters. Also, he's going to be fighting werewolves, vampires, so on and so forth, uh, till eventually the monster world happens. So yeah. So with that said, yeah, I'm kind of coming up with a much more story for this character that I've created, but where is it going to go? Probably nowhere. But hey, it's kind of cool to just kind of come up with a whole entire story that eventually I could just talk about in a video, and maybe it won't go anywhere, but maybe it might become a story someday if I could ever rationally write a book. So, so yeah, so with that said, yeah, like, there could be a lot of other Power Rangers pitch ideas um, that at the end of this that we could really make, and there's a lot more behind the scenes stuff that I could probably talk about that'll probably pop into my brain whenever I am to more and more talk about Power Rangers at some point. Um, but yeah, like more than likely, I'm also kind of concerned the more and more that I talk, the more and more that any of the things that I'm going to say are going to be a repeat thing that I already said in this video, or are going to be things that I'm not going to be able to connect with the overall theme, which is to be uh, trying to figure out how to best sell another Power Ranger season. Because most of the time it's like, well, hey, how did all these people get to be on the show? And the funny thing of it is, we come to find that at first off, like they hired a bunch of athletes, like they hired a bunch of gymnasts or people that have been trained in karate. And then later and later in the seasons, like we come to find out that they just hired actors that I guess can fight or kind of figure out how to fight and do all of these things. And I'm like, man, like how times have changed. But really, when you go on and you just kind of do a Power Ranger season, it really gets down to us finding out that every time that the Power Rangers are to ever fight on the show is really when they are to be their morph selves. So it's like, okay, so like the Rangers never fight on the show, and they have to deliver certain stories and whatever. But yeah, like I really can much more understand why uh, the stories are to be catered the way they are, because they just hired actors instead of hiring legitimate karate and or athletic people. But here's also the thing. I started to find out, well, kind of watching the behind the scenes stuff, is that like they would have uh the Power Ranger stuff, and then they would have uh the actor stuff being separately shot to cut down on filming time. And so you had, I think, Steve, who played the second Red Ranger, who was saying like, well, yeah, like we did like 3 episodes in a week. So I'm like, god dang. Like, yeah, you had 16 hours probably a day of doing certain shows, but yeah, like to do 3 episodes in 1 week, that seems like a lot. Um, like I get that all like that most of the show is rinse and repeat, because you have the same footage being used over and over and over again. Um, but also, like, man, that seemed crazy. It seemed crazy. Because I've seen or I've heard a lot of shows that end up getting like 1 week is used for one episode. So I'm just thinking like, well, like a Power Rangers episode is probably like 20 some odd minutes. And so yeah, so really that's probably why they can get away with doing 3 episodes in 1 week, because the shows are only 20 minutes. But so with that said, um it still just sounds crazy to me. Um can't really think of anything else that kind of comes to mind that really is to be nothing but like, hey, the Titanium Ranger. But yeah, I watch a lot of these behind the scenes featurettes. Some are on YouTube, and like definitely go ahead and check them all out. They talk about the fandom, or they talk about the props, and the person who would go on and create all the props for the show, and just have these like random uh, pieces and antique parts that he would all glue together. It's a very interesting story. Uh, I'm assuming that the all of the morphers were already done by the Sentai people, and they would just have to repurpose them for the show. And eventually, you would find out that a number of the morphers that were all being sold uh, while the show was going on, like the prop master would eventually have to go on and find a Walmart somewhere, buy the morphers to turn around and be used on the show. So that was a legit thing that one of the Rangers had gone on and said at some point, that from the prop master of the Power Rangers show was actually true. It's like, all right. So uh but then you would also have like the shift into turbo uh Power Rangers turbo morphers that uh really you would come to find that they never had the keys for them, or they had to use some goofy thing that looked like the turbo key, but it really wasn't. That I think was funny. Um, Jason had a broken communicator that he would consistently have to hold and do the communicator thing for I don't know how long. Um, you would also find that a number of Power Rangers had stole props from the show. Might as well. You can get away with it, I guess. But yeah. Um, other than that, yeah. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about Power Rangers in general. Let me know how you feel about the show. Maybe you're to another fan that is just a person that liked Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and that's it. And also, maybe a lot of people could not really be enjoying this kind of content. I don't know. Um, like, hey man, I don't like you talking about Power Rangers, but it's fun for me. It's fun to just kind of talk about things, instead of having to do a whole entire review on something that eventually will be a thing that really wipes me out for that day. But yeah, it's always fun to just kind of talk and whatever in general. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. I don't know what else to say, and I also fear I will repeat something. So yeah, like I've already probably just said that anyways. So I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.